This sculpture, you're going to need some tools. My favorite tool for building armatures is something like this. A multi-tool. This is a Leatherman, but we're going to use the pliers, and you can use that to cut the wires. This is especially handy for building armatures. This is aluminum wire or sculpture wire. I think I got this from Sculpture House, and the benefit is that it's very pliable and it won't break easy, but you can still cut it using snips and it works really great. You should probably have a dedicated cutting tool, but you could also use your Leatherman. This one is a lot easier to use. Do this. Cut equal lengths of right about here because my head is going to be very small. I'm going to use plasticine for this sculpture. So it's not meant to remove. One's bigger than the other, but it doesn't matter. So I'm going to round it off like this. And you kind of want to determine what the size of your head is going to be. So if you look at my hand, that is the size, but I want to build it just a little bit blocky here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I do not want to waste a lot of clay, and this is really nice to have it nice and flexible. So put it right up on the top here, and this is when my Leatherman will come into play. A little egg beater thing, and now you just take this and just kind of push it on the inside. I like to squeeze it so it kind of firms it up. What I like to do is just kind of loop this down here. So I'm just going to take some plastic like this. Just going to put it inside. Then I like to take a plastic bag. And you don't have to do this. You could actually just start putting stuff directly on your sculpture. Bunch this onto here. For the clay, I'm using this Jmac. I'm actually going to like destroy all out of this clay. And I really like this clay because it's a good middle. It's kind of soft, so it can be kind of fluid. I have my clay here. This is Jmac from another project. And all I'm going to do is put it in the microwave for a couple of minutes, 1 minute tops, maybe 2. And it's going to be in such good working consistency that we can start working. I'm going to take our chunk of clay and we're going to just wrap it around. It's going to be the neck. Yeah, this Jmac clay is really amazing. I'm just going to take a big chunk and add it. You know, another thing I'll say about water-based clay is that it kind of ruins your tools. They start to rust and everything because you're using water. And if you don't clean them properly like I do, they tend to break. What I try and do is draw a line straight down the middle of the figure. What I like to do right away is kind of figure out where the eyes are going to be. But we do have a couple other things that we should be careful. So a lot of artists divide the head into thirds. So top of the hairline, say here, to the top of the eyebrows, to the bottom of the nose, will reveal thirds. But a lot of people don't do that too. But it really depends on the model as well. And it depends if you do a classical model. And then I like to put where the temple is. And at this point, it's really good to have your reference up. I do have my reference up that I'm looking at directly. This particular model is from Postspace, and it's Zaza from Postspace. So it's the free pose that you get when you go to postspace.com. They'll have this directly on the website. So you can download that for free. It's kind of like a trial. It's a African model, and very beautiful African model, and very high cheekbones, very difficult to do. I think just about everything is difficult. I think I make it much more difficult. So we're going to round off the cranium. Usually non-white models, I have a harder time because they're so much more different than my own head, if that makes any sense. So I like to round off the head. This is going to be the chin right here. And just by doing this really quickly, we can develop the pose. Cheekbones. Cheekbones are really high. Her chin is very prominent as well. And the good thing about these sort of wooden modeling tools is that you can create flat edges very quickly. Very flat. The thing I'm going to lay down is the sternocleidomastoid here. I think a lot of sculptors, they go directly to the profile, but it kind of takes me a while to get there. just going to do some details on the hair. And the hair is braided in such a very unique way that you really don't want to spend, at least I don't want to spend a lot of time doing the individual sections of the hair. I'm just trying to create a very general hair, very generalized, because you could spend a lot of time just doing the hair as unique as it is, or you can just kind of indicate it. It's not all about creating a very finished piece sometimes, but at least for me, what I want to do is create the idea that it is braided. And you don't really need to spend a lot of time in the hair, because a lot of times too, when you work on the hair, no one really pays too much attention to the hair, and the idea that it's better just to have a more finished head and then a less finished head. To me, I kind of like that idea a lot. And unless you were to do a portrait sculpture, and you were actually getting paid to do portrait sculpture, there's not much need to do a lot of details. But I do kind of like the idea of making a finished head and a very unfinished section of the hair. And I probably will do that. I just want to indicate where the hair starts and where it ends. So think of the hair as kind of like what you do with muscles, the origin and insertion. But the hair itself, there's a lot to it. So right here at the top, there's a little bit more, because that's where the hair originates, and then it kind of goes into various positions. So if I move the sculpture around, you'll see various strands. At least that's what I'm creating. So right here, I'll actually take one of these tools and I kind of will draw in where the hair will start and where it ends up. So then I can create, and it's not about making something very generalized, but you just want to not spend a lot of time and indicate things and still give it an interesting sort of texture. But always keep in mind, you want to look at the model, see what's happening, but don't copy it. Don't copy the pose. It doesn't really matter, especially if you're not getting paid for it. You just want to create a general kind of look. Okay. All right, I am gonna move. So this part definitely looks a lot emptier, because there's a lot more things happening in the back, because this is where the hair all comes back here. And what I do is I'll take clumps of clay and I'll lay them out. I'm looking at the model. So there's this clump right here. I'll add it in like this, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Kind of squint your eye, don't look at the details, just look at the big picture, like the mass. And you kind of want to look around. The hard part with working with an online pose is that it does take a little bit more knowledge of anatomy and to realize what's really happening. But once you kind of get the hang of it, it's easy. It took me a really long time to fully understand how to work from photography in clay, because I've always done sculpture from life, and when you do things from life, you get to move around. And the danger of this sort of sculpture is that you don't move around a lot or at all. Stationary, what I'm doing is I'm using my mouse to kind of move the images, sliding the images around so I get different vantage points. It would be nice to have a slideshow so it automatically moves but not necessary. All right, so I'm gonna add a little bit more clay to the back and then we'll add some details. We're kind of nearing the end of this sculpture. I'm already thinking about the next one. So on this part, this is when like a very big tool like this will come into play because it's got like serrated edges. So if you do this, you can blend the hair together. And I use this in my water-based clay and I use it on my oiled clay and it works really well. I like the, also the texture could be useful for doing the hair, except I don't really like to generalize things of the hair or anywhere. I kind of like want to study the figure a little bit. Now, one of the limitations of this Jmac clay, when it gets too wet, it kind of sticks to your tool. And what I like about water clay, when it's in the right consistency, it doesn't stick to the tool. And for doing this size, what I'm finding is that this size, you're better off with a harder clay instead of the Jmac. The Jmac clay is really good. It's actually one of my favorite clays, oil-based clays that I've ever used. I've used Roma, I've used like Sculpt and all of these things. But I find that if you're a old school traditional sculptor, I think you'll find Jmac clay gives you a similar style. It almost feels like you can sculpt this very much like you do a very loose sculpture if it's warm. I've heard a lot of good things about monster clay, and monster clay is something that I've been interested of getting, but the problem with monster clay is that it's very expensive. So this is the alternative to monster clay. I think monster clay might be better if it's a little bit harder and it doesn't become as gummy, because if this is really wet and soft, it does stick to your tool a little bit too much. It would be nice if I can control the hardness a little bit more. The monster clay I heard is really popular. If you watch any YouTube videos, that's what a lot of the sculptors use. Comic book sculptors will use monster clay instead of water clay. It seems like water clay has fallen out of favor, but I do like water clay. It's cheap, it's abundant, you can even make your own. But unfortunately, it is something that's got limitations. You have to cover it, and it does kind of create a lot of moisture in your studio if you don't like that. And if you use it to make very large sculptures, then dust will kind of accumulate. I do get my studio a lot more dirty using water-based clay, and it is nice not to cover your clay. So water-based clay, you have to cover it at the end of the day if you don't want it to dry out. This, you can just keep working. It's just really, really nice that you can just keep working. Now, I would like to try some self-hardening clay. You can just like leave it out and it'll harden by itself. But I hear it's not really a very permanent solution. So I've been kind of shying away from it. Let's put a little bit on that nostril and get the nose a little bit better. There is a piece that her nose is wider at the bridge. So if you put a little bit of clay here and you use the right tool to kind of push it down, this is what I'm going to use, so I can just use the side there. You have to push it in because there's a little bit of fat that comes from the nose and it goes right into the cheek like that, and I'll just blend it into the side of the nose. And then here I'll carefully just gonna push it down. There's also a little bit of a depression here in the eye. And if you just blend that, it'll look a little bit better. And of course right here, just a little bit more depression. You know, that's the thing. I can keep going over and over and work on something until it's very finished. But often, it's kind of nice to have something that's not as polished. And I think I am getting better at kind of just letting go. So the eyebrows are a little bit tough because you can add, you need to indicate where the eyebrows are. Some people make a flat plane like this, and then they'll draw in where the hairs kind of go. But the more important thing is to indicate where that edge, that corner is. Like that. And then you want to indicate where the bone of the skull is, the orbicularis oculi bone, which is here. And if you just push it in, with water-based clay, it's a little bit easier, I think. And you want to keep this nice and flat. Also, you can create a little bit of a shine just by using a flat tool. Now in water clay, you can really create that look of the bone because you can burnish the clay. Just by using, for example, my fingers, I can rub it in the cheek and it creates a soft texture. But if you'd use a flat metal tool, you can kind of create the idea that there is a bone there. That's something that not a lot of people usually explain because it's a little bit more of an advanced technique, but think of every single bone that comes on the surface of your sculpture, you should treat it a little bit differently than you do the flash. But also keep everything nice and flat. Don't make it too smooth. You don't want to lose the planes of the sculpture. All right, we're going to keep just adding a little bit more details. We're going to work a little bit on the hair here. Also, she parts her hair right in the middle here. And you would think that perhaps it's something that is not even worth mentioning, but remember, the hair starts in a place and it ends in a place. It's not too terribly finished. The hair is almost abstract, and I usually tend to do that quite a bit in sculptures. I'll leave sections of it a little bit more abstract than the others. That is, not as finished as the face or something. And usually too, I will use the face and create a much more finished face, but I thought, I think I'm going to just kind of leave it rough. And often I find that a lot of sculptures, they do look good if you leave them a little bit on the rougher side. And I can just keep going over and over with this, but I think this is a decent study for what I wanted to do. And you could spend a lot of time just working on this, but you can see it's a very small head, and I think I am going to be doing more portraits that are smaller instead of larger. So remember, I am using this. It's Jmac clay, and it comes in slabs, and the slabs are, this is medium. They do have a different type of clay, which is soft, medium, and hard. So it's different colors. Usually I guess you don't mix it, but it's a pretty nice clay and I really like it. And of course the downside with oil-based clay is that you really can't fire it. Of course you can't fire it because it'll just melt, but you have to make a mold to make it permanent. There's no way of making it permanent with just this. You'd have to make a mold. Sometimes it's kind of good to do these rougher sort of sculptures, and the beautiful thing about oil-based clay is that you can pretty much leave it outside, you don't have to cover it, and you can just keep working it over and over. But that's pretty much it. I really appreciate you guys watching these videos, and stay tuned. I'll upload another video probably next Wednesday, and I'm going to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.